Back before Google, LinkedIn, and cell phones, I stumbled on recruiting. I always knew I wanted to create a recruiting firm that created an incredible candidate and client experience while allowing me, as well as my team, an opportunity to live an abundant life on our own terms, to have the freedom to work where, when, and how we want, and to be rewarded financially for a job well done. It has been a long, sometimes messy marathon, but wow, have I learned a lot about recruiting, branding, sales, scaling, leadership, overcoming challenges, and most importantly, overcoming myself. I absolutely love our industry, and this podcast is for you, my fellow recruiters ready to learn, grow, and push yourself to your next level. Let's do this together. We are talking about all things recruiting. Hello, my friends. Today on the podcast, we are talking about everything legal for your small recruiting firm. I'm really excited to have Sarah Gilliland join me. She is the founding attorney at Rising Brand Legal and creator of the Legal Shoppe. She has over 20 years in the legal space and is dedicated to working with entrepreneurs and small businesses so that they feel confident that what they've worked so hard to build is protected. And this aspect of our business is so important, you guys. So I'm really excited to have her on the podcast. We're going to talk about what it takes legally to start a business, contracts, things that you should include in those contracts to clients, candidates, or independent contractors even, non-competes, copywriting, trademarks, and a lot more. So let's get into it. All right. Thank you so much for returning for another episode of All Things Recruiting. And I have such a great guest with me. I have Sarah Gilliland, who has been my attorney in the past for all the legal things that I've needed. And we've known each other, Sarah, for a couple years.
I feel like it's been a few years now. Yeah.
It's been already a couple years. And I always emphasize, like, we met in person. We met at a networking event for women. And it's always so amazing how it's like the connections that you make that are long-term are usually the ones that are always made in person. Yeah. So I'm glad that we met and we have so many great things to talk about. So thank you for coming on, Sarah.
Yeah, you bet. I'm excited for it.
Yes, me too. So before we get into all the good details that we're going to talk about, how did you get into law? Like, give us kind of that 30-second 30 seconds. It's hard to fit everything in 30 seconds, but give us a short overview of like your background, and then how you got into law in the first place.
Yeah, it's a little silly, but I'm proud of it. My whole life, I wanted to be a lawyer. I remember second grade telling people that I was going to be a lawyer, and it was imposed on me more than me deciding it for myself. I grew up in Oklahoma, which is very conservative and very children should be seen and not heard. And I think that probably applied to little girls more than any other children. And I had opinions and I had something to say about pretty much everything. And so the adults in my life would give well, you should be a lawyer. And I realize now that was not a compliment. To probably a way for people to get comfortable and put me in a box that could make sense for my big mouth. And I really grabbed onto it. I was going to be a judge because that way my older sister would have to listen to me. So I could boss my older sister around and do the thing everybody said. I also grew up very, very poor. We were on welfare. Our electricity wasn't on a notable portion of the time. And my friends whose parents were lawyers could buy Chick-fil-A at the mall on any day but Sunday. They could do the things that felt so bougie to me at the time, but just meant a comfortable lifestyle. And so those were the two driving factors for 8-year-old me. And then I just really held on to it, and I love learning. So continuing my education, going on further made a lot of sense. And here I am, 16 years later, still practicing law.
I love it when people find their passion so early in life because sometimes it can, well, sometimes people can never find it or
Sure.
find it, after a really long time of searching. So that's so great that you knew right offhand. What made you, because I would think with law, like there's so many different things and so many different areas of law to go into. Like, how
hmm
did you start in a different area and then decide, like, how did you end up in this particular field and an entrepreneur as well?
Yeah, I think that was more of the mature evolution where 8-year-old me was going to be a lawyer so that I could boss my sister and eat Chick-fil-A. And then as an adult, also just kind of where the world was. I finished law school in '08. So while the economy was crashing and nobody knew which way was up, I was entering my career. At the time, entering lawyers were being offered somewhere in the realm of $30 to $35,000 a year salaries. I could not pay
Wow.
for my son's childcare with that. So
Wow.
that really was the entrepreneur journey that I was felt forced into, sort of, where I had to do something that I could control my income because the attorney jobs weren't going to cut it. It was simply not going to work out. Um, and I definitely had that drive. I remember the lawyers I worked for in college and in law school when they would ask me my future plans. I, I didn't realize they meant with their firms, and I would say, "Oh, well, I want to have my own thing," and that wasn't really well received. But it was in me, and then where the economy in the world was, it just really pushed me into that entrepreneurial realm of it. I very much thought I was going to be your black suit and heels trial lawyer. I was going to be in court fighting the good fight for everybody all the time. I considered doing criminal law, family law. Um, I had the benefit, like I mentioned, of working for two different law firms that did a little bit of everything. And um, my level of empathy and my level of emotions, I could not be objective. We had some awful cases, just gut wrenching, belongs in a Lifetime movie, the bad kind, not the Hallmark happy kind,
Hmm.
cases that I was like, okay, I can't be a balanced mother and wife and all of my other roles in this world and do this kind of law. It's not my personality. I need to do something that I can get more excited and passionate about. The hard stuff, God bless those lawyers because it's really freaking hard.
Yeah, I could. Yeah. So when I went to school, I always wanted to be a counselor. Like I wanted to get my
Mhm.
master's in psychology. That was my degree, and I think was that your
My
degree too?
undergrad was in
Yeah, your
psychology. Yeah.
undergrad. Yeah, I
Uh-huh.
saw that. So I always liked helping people, and I always thought, well, I want to go, get like be a social worker or a
hmm
psychologist. But very quickly I realized like I would just cry all day. I would probably, because I'm an emotional, like I have so much empathy for other people that I'm like, there's no way I could help them. I would just be like, you know, like crying with
Yeah.
them all day.
And I
So
think
yeah,
that
it's
that's
like you
a
have to be
very
able to.
wise and self-aware conclusion to come to because we would do nobody any good. We would not
Hmm.
be, if we were a mess, we would not be in any place
Right. I'm like,
to
I
do
can't
good.
help anyone. I'm just want to like, yeah.
Yeah.
No, so that's great. So tell, because I know a little bit, but I want you to be able to kind of tell in your own words. So what are you really focused in right now? Like I know what you and I have talked about and worked on, but overall, I know that you're so passionate about helping other entrepreneurs, and there's so many people that are listening to this podcast that usually, they're in recruiting, but they might have
hmm
decided to go off on their own and start their own small boutique firm, or they have, thoughts of scaling and really growing their firm. So, what, as it pertains to that, like, what are you focused on helping entrepreneurs with?
Yeah, my practice has grown into that whole business structure. And since I love new businesses, and since I would love, I think maybe before we started recording, I was talking about I would love to just start something new every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
If that was realistic. I've had so much fun growing my practice into helping people get those businesses either off the ground or that next level scale. A lot of my clients, they come to me about 5 years in, 5 to 7 years in, and success kind of crept up on them, and they're like, oh gosh, I don't have any of those foundational things. Help me out. That's so fun for me, getting to dig into and play with and really set those legal foundations for somebody else's business. I get really excited and giddy about that. I love that creative side of it. So
Hmm.
that's where everything from making sure people have contracts for every business relationship that they have, that their brand is protected with trademarks, that we have intellectual property and brand protection in their contracts and all their structures. Maybe there's partners and we need a really good partnership agreement. And then all the way into what's next? What's your exit plan? What happens? Some estate planning. What happens to your business if something happens to you? Not those things aren't as fun to think about,
Hmm.
but seeing the relief and watching my clients scale and grow when they have the confidence of that legal foundation, that's it for me. Like that's all I need.
Yeah, and it's so refreshing because I know I've worked with other attorneys in the past, and sometimes it's just so, what's the word? Non Just impersonal,
Yeah, kind
like
of
the
dull.
attorney, it's like, right, like, yeah, let's get the appointment. It's just very structured and very like stale and dry. And I know
Hmm.
working with you has just been like the opposite, and
Thank
I
you.
feel like, yeah, like it's just a partnership you're really like passionate about helping. And so that's huge to
Yeah, it
find.
is
So,
truly fun for me. And I think actually I know, and what I can say is that we're not trained that way. Starting with law school, we're not trained to enjoy what we do. It's this subtle message in every bit of our education of be really serious and work long
mhm.
hours and drag yourself through the mud. And I think that ends up showing in a lot of the attorney relationships. And if I ever get there, I would let it go before I let myself get there. I would just decide, okay, this isn't the career for me anymore. I'll do something next.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
yeah, it can be so dull.
Yeah, I always say like if I'm not having fun anymore, then there's something wrong, and I need to I need
Yeah.
to relook at everything
Hmm.
that I'm doing because you can do both, right? You can have a great professional career and also enjoy what you're doing, and you found a way to actually help people, so it brings you, joy as
Make it
well as
fun.
success. Yeah,
Yeah.
make it fun.
And I've
What would
taken
you
that
say? Yeah,
break before.
yeah.
When I had a firm in another state, I sold it before I moved to Arizona, and I had burnt myself out. It wasn't fun anymore. If you had met me in 2018, I was retired and I was never going to be a lawyer again. So sometimes it kind of does take taking that break and just kind of getting reflective and deciding what do I want the next season to look like and creating that for yourself. That's okay too.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think us as entrepreneurs, that's what we do, right? You can reframe things and still do what you love, but do it in a different way. And I think a lot of our listeners probably are like that too. Like they love recruiting, but they might have worked for another agency or they might have worked in a corporate setting and they're like, I want to do this differently. I don't want to leave
Hmm.
my career, but I want it on my own terms and I want it to look different. So,
Well, I was thinking with your when you had talked about your recruiters, some of your listeners being recruiters that have gone
yeah,
boutique. That's exactly what
yeah.
I was curious if that's probably a lot of them that they're like, okay, I this is my training, this is my expertise, but I can't do it whatever this way is anymore.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, what would you say are like two or three things, like if someone's starting out in their own
Hmm.
boutique firm, what are two or three like legal things that they should make sure that they get under their belt like as they're starting? What are the top like two to three important things
Yeah,
when
I
it
would
comes to legal?
say if you have any kind of partner, if you're not on your own, if you have any kind of partner, making sure you have an agreement between you and that partner of all the ways that business is going to run, what would happen with that business if either one of you wanted out of it, and what would happen to that business if something, the worst case scenario, happened to either one of you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's so easy to get through all of the really, really hard topics when everybody's getting along. When it's the honeymoon phase of business partnership, even like the ugly conversations we can all kind of laugh about. We're like, well, that would never happen with us. And we're like, good, I hope not. Now
Yeah.
let's chart out exactly how we would want that to look if you don't want to speak to each other, if you are losing trust in each other. It's so much easier to get that all settled while everybody has the utmost trust and respect and love for each other. And then, and I had a 10-year long business partnership. And when it ended, it actually ended really amicably. And we're still friends and we still check in with each other. And I think it's because we talked all those things out in the beginning. And when we had our few rough patches of, um, we're going to wring each other's necks right now. When we had a couple of times that we had fully lost trust in each other, we had a foundation to go back to where the business didn't crumble out from underneath us. So if you have any kind of partnership, definitely document that. And then next would be contracts with every business relationship you have. So if you have clients that you're working with, making sure you have really clear contracts with those clients. If you have employees or contractors that work for you, if you have referral relationships, everything that there's an understanding, you're going to do this, I'm going to do this, here's how money's going to flow, that should be documented in a contract. I always say, because a lot of times in new businesses, people are like, well, I'm just working with my friends, so we're good. Contracts save friendships because, again, you're charting everything out. So if you get sideways, if you get um, disagreeing on how something should go, you have a foundation to look back to and be like, oh yeah, that's what we agreed to. Let's keep going with that. It just takes so many dispute topics off the table that those conflicts can't even come up. And then the third would be your brand protection. If you're going to name your business something and you've got this great, clever name and you can't wait to tell the world about it, protect that first. And that goes twofold because one, somebody else may have already thought of that, and you don't want to get attached in your brand and your business attached to that name and then later learn it's not yours. And then on the other side of it, you don't want anybody else to rip it off. And I'll say 75% of my clients have had brand conflicts that somebody has ripped off their brand. It's been somebody in their circle. So that even feels that much more gross when you're ready to launch something and somebody that you trusted betrayed you. And now you're looking at that conflict. So the brand protection as soon as possible through trademarks is absolutely important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to ask you about trademarks. So, um, just so everyone, like our listeners, like what is a trademark? Like how would you describe what that is? Because I feel like there's some, like sometimes people don't know exactly what a
Yeah.
trademark is.
And that area of law gets thrown around a lot. You'll hear business coaches and all kinds of people throwing words around trademark, copyright, patents, and people are like, I don't know, it sounds like something I need. Sounds expensive and complicated.
Right, right.
um, so the trademark is your right across the entire country. So a United States trademark protects you across the entire country of the United States to use that name, slogan, logo. So any of those, it doesn't have to be just the business name or it doesn't have to be your LLC name. It's whatever your brand name is, or it can be your slogan, tagline, logo, any of those things. It's protecting your right to use that in your category of business. And those are the two really important pieces, is that you have the protection and it's in your category of business. The example most people are really familiar with is Dove. So we've got Dove chocolate and Dove soap. Those are two
Mm,
completely different brands that have trademarked the word Dove. So they're not just claiming ownership of the word that nobody else is allowed to utter that word without their permission, but they have protected it in their category of business. Since Dove soap is soap and shampoos and that kind of thing, and Dove chocolate is candy, they can both hold that brand because no one's going to be confused of, has my soap company now started making candy or vice versa. The general customer is going to assume that those are different. So that's why your protection only falls in your category of business.
I didn't know that, but yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
thinking of
There's a,
Dove.
people forget
Yeah.
that because
Yeah.
they'll get confused, or I'll notice that people get really offended sometimes by trademarks being filed. They'll say, well, how dare so and so trademark that word? It's such a common word. We all use it. Well, you can keep using it. You just can't take money and use it for business in that
In
category
that
if
category, that
somebody
makes
else has
sense.
trademarked it. Yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes people will use their last name
Hmm.
or their first name, so that makes complete sense that it's only in that category. So,
Yeah.
yeah, very interesting. Okay, good. As far as like first setting up a company, people
Hmm.
have the option to do like an LLC or an S corp. Is there kind
Yeah.
of like just a standard? Like when people are first starting out, I feel like I see more people getting LLCs.
Yeah.
Um, and
That
yeah,
is
so
your
tell me about
total
that.
safe
Like,
place to start, and
yeah,
that you're thinking about it perfectly. And I'm so glad you brought that up because I think we kind of can sweep that under the rug to some of the bigger things. LLC is totally a safe place to start. A corporation is going to involve shareholders and a board and your leadership. So a corporation is kind of intense when you have one person. I'm the president and the secretary and
right.
all of these things. So that's why you don't see most businesses starting with a corporation. You can, it's just kind of intense, and it tends to have much more expensive um, tax upkeep cost to it. So you're not paying more taxes, but what you're paying your tax professionals to upkeep a corporation. That's why most people don't start with it, because it's pretty expensive for that upkeep. An LLC is a totally safe place to start. And if you are what we refer to as a pass-through LLC, which is sort of the default, you're just being, and I'm not a tax professional. I'm just,
Hmm.
my full disclaimer,
Yeah,
I'm a lawyer, not a CPA.
yeah,
But with that pass through, what your tax professional will tell you is you're just going to see that income pass through like as self-employed income. And then an S corp, and this is where people get super confused. So this is like the golden ticket of LLC S corp. An S corp is an LLC. You are still an LLC. So for the state filing purposes and the way you're structured and the way you do business, you're a limited liability company. But an S corp means you've taken an election to be treated as a corporation for tax purposes. The number kind of shifts, but a lot of tax professionals and accountants will tell you start with the LLC, and then we'll do that election to move into S Corp once you're making around six figures. Now, like I said, that can shift and change depending on, you know, if you have employees and what you're paying them. But essentially, what they look at is when is your cost of task S Corp management? When is what you're paying your CPA to manage that S Corp? You're going to save more in taxes by paying yourself as an employee versus self-employed income. So that's where that shift happens. But everybody that's a single or two-member company, that there's nothing else legally special going on, starting as an LLC is a totally safe way to start. And in most states, you can change it into something else when and if that makes sense.
perfect. Yeah, and I think it's pretty easy. The LLC process
Hmm.
is pretty easy for people. Either they can do it on their own, or is that something you handle too?
Yeah, I handle that for
Yeah.
people. I tend to say do it completely on your own, as in get on your
Hmm.
state's government website and do it yourself, or hire a lawyer.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of the discount online services because one, the info you have to give them is identical to what you give just getting on your state website and doing it yourself. They don't actually provide a
Right.
service to you. And then your company can kind of get caught up in their process and system. So I recently had a client that went through a discount service and the wrong thing got done, and then the name of their company was kind of held in limbo at the state level because this discount service had done the wrong thing, and then we couldn't do the right thing, and it was a whole week of just trying to undo what had happened so that I could jump in and do it for them. So
Yeah.
I would say get on there and do it yourself, but if you're confused and you're like I don't understand the questions that are being asked, then just have a lawyer do it.
Hmm.
Because the cost of getting it wrong is with pretty much anything legal. The cost of getting it wrong is just exponentially higher than fixing it. It's like going for your annual teeth cleaning at the dentist versus going for a root canal. Like just get the maintenance done and get the foundation done right.
Exactly. That's probably, I think, a lot with any kind of legal, like the agreements that we were just talking about, the initial setup, the
Hmm.
contracts, like do it ahead of time
Yeah.
instead of waiting till something happens and then trying to find, a good lawyer to help you. It's better to get it, get ahead, be proactive in the beginning,
Hmm.
so that maybe you can avoid it. You don't have to
Yeah.
get to
And
that
that's
point either,
everything
right?
I do. I do your cleanings. I do your
Right.
foundational work. If you're to the point that you're in a legal problem or in a fight with somebody, I refer those to my very competent courtroom lawyers that the feedback has been they are much more expensive than me.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. What about like another thing that happens? I know in the recruiting industry, like the past year, the big thing that we've been talking about is just the non-competes, like whether
Hmm.
they hold up now, whether they don't. I think there's been things in the news, like it goes back and forth. So, do you have any insight on like what's happening like now?
Yes, that is such a good question because I feel like the two major things that happened with businesses over the last 2 years was the non-competes and the BOI reports. And
Yeah. Yeah.
there was so much whiplash on what was going on, and a law would be passed, and then a lawsuit would change the result. That even still, now that both of them have been settled for a handful of months, both of those topics have been settled for a handful of months. People are still like, wait, what am I supposed to do? So on the non-compete front, I'll give just a little bit of
Yeah.
background on what happened.
Yeah.
Is the Federal Trade Commission, which is in charge of making sure people as consumers are not defrauded. So that's the main thing is they are a regulatory agency at a federal level, Federal Trade Commission, um, that just kind of keeps businesses in check over and above all the other laws we have and people's ability to sue each other. The Federal Trade Commission says, hey, we're going to be an oversight to make sure nobody gets screwed over, essentially. They stepped in, depending on opinion, a little bit outside of their lane and said, you know what, we think that non-competes are bad for trade. We think that if nobody could have a non-compete, then businesses would grow and do better. So they set out a regulation that said non-competes are going to be federally illegal. Well, the Federal Trade Commission is not a law-making body. They are a regulatory body. Each state has their own differing non-compete laws. So California, for example, it is very, very challenging to have an enforceable non-compete. Arizona, Texas, many other states have, a narrow view. They scrutinize them a lot, but you can have them. But people got really confused because the Federal Trade Commission made this announcement. They're illegal. And then they were sued and the court said, yeah, you don't have the authority to do that. Essentially, I'm paraphrasing,
Yeah, yeah,
obviously.
yeah.
So they went from illegal to legal to whatever your state says. So at a federal level, that whole regulation went away. It was as if it never happened. Now, most states still, it is state by state basis. So, like I said, California is really, really tough on non-competes. Arizona, for example, Texas, for example, they just have to be what's considered reasonable. And that would be reasonable in the eye of whoever the legal decision maker is at the time. So if
Mm-hmm.
somebody's suing over a non-compete, it's that judge, or if it's a jury trial, it's that group of people. Typically, what you want to see for it to be viewed as reasonable is not the target can't be that that individual can't make an income. So that's, we just think of public policy wise, people being able to have a career and pay their bills is a good thing. And so you need to make sure your non-competes, if you want to have that in your contract, you need to make sure it doesn't even appear that that's the goal. So you want to have it limited in geographic scope. If you say we're going to have this non-compete and you cannot work in this field in the state of Arizona for 5 years, you're essentially telling, as a business, telling an individual you can't make an income unless you move states for the next 5 years. That is not going to go over well. But if you really narrow it, so I wrote one recently for a client that it said for 1 year for a 5 mile radius from this business, that's going to be looked at as pretty reasonable. You're not making somebody drive 2 hours away from home. You're not making somebody give up their career and go back and get a new education. You're just saying, don't be in our neighborhood. Usually that's going to be seen as very reasonable. So your
Mm-hmm.
time and geographic area are the main factors on whether or not those are going to be looked at well or not.
That
But they
makes
are
sense.
legal. They're not, I shouldn't say they are legal because it depends on the state. They are not federally illegal.
Right.
Isn't that a
So
lawyer's
probably,
answer?
no, so probably it hasn't really changed too much from what it was before,
Right.
right? Before
Right.
that,
It went back to what it was before
to what
that.
it was before. Okay.
Hmm.
That's what I thought, but thank you for clarifying because yeah,
Yeah.
you
And some
never
states
never
did
know.
go, some states that really liked the ban did go tighten up their laws.
Hmm.
But yeah, for the most part, we just went back and pretended like none of that had ever happened.
Right. So yeah, so if you are creating one again, like geographically, like that would be something you'd want to include
Hmm.
and just be realistic and not try to, prohibit someone from earning
Yeah.
a living doing their career.
Right. And one step down that I find a lot of my clients end up preferring, they're like, you know what, actually, let's not do a non-compete at all. Instead, they take one step down and we do a non-solicitation, which is saying you can go be in this industry anywhere you want. You just can't reach out to the clients you met through us. You can't reach out to our current employees and try to recruit away from us. So that's one step down from the non-compete. Now you can call it a non-solicitation if it still waddles and quacks. It's going to be called a duck, um, but that kind of is even looked at as more reasonable. Of work in this field anywhere you want for any amount of time, but just your clients that you know because of this role, don't reach out to them for a year. And that my clients tend to like because they're like, okay, it's even less of a chance we're going to end up in litigation over this because no one wants to be in court fighting over whether or not it's reasonable.
Right. Absolutely. What have you seen? Like, I think this is going to be a fairly, well, I think it's new, but you might tell me otherwise. Like, with the whole AI, a lot of us in the recruiting industry, we're jumping in, we're, using it, we're trying to learn
Hmm.
as much as possible. Have you seen either cases come up or just like that whole legal thing about using AI and then potentially not even necessarily knowing it, but like copying content or
Hmm.
like how is that do you see in the future going to be played out
You
for
see, I get so
people that are
excited to
trying to
talk about
yeah
this.
yeah
Like, okay,
you're like
Sarah, watch the
ooh
time.
something
You cannot get on
new.
a soapbox
R-
and go crazy.
but it's
It
true
is
like there's
new.
so much yeah
Yeah,
what
it
have you
is
been seeing
new.
like what do you think's going to happen with just all the like copycat like content copycat stuff that you might not even you're just like asking AI, and then all of a sudden I mean, is that happening a lot, do you think?
It is, and here's what we're faced with. And I don't think technology can really change what I'm about to say. The law is about 10 years behind reality. It always has been. And AI in particular is, maybe because it is such a significant matter and it holds so much weight, maybe we can speed up that process through. From my position, I'm like, can somebody please hurry up and sue each other over this so that we can get some law? Because that's how the
Yeah.
law is developed. We are out in the wild doing things. People get mad and sue each other. And that court decision, and it's not even going to be that first court, they then have to appeal and take it up to higher level courts. And then what they say ends up being our law. So that's one way of making a law, and then legislation. So our legislators meet and say, hey, we're going to have XYZ be the law. For AI, it's going to be really hard for legislation to help us out because legislation is very, very specific. You cannot rob a bank. Robbery is illegal.
Yeah.
Legislation's super specific. Now they will write it in 1,000 pages in the law, but it won't really hit your scenarios. Case law, so people suing each other and going up to higher level of courts, is really where we get the specificity of the narrative, the story of what happened. And that takes time. It takes a really long time to get through all of those level of courts. It takes about 10 years. So that's where I say
Wow.
law falls 10 years behind reality because it just takes that long to move through the legal system. Um, but yes, AI is absolutely an issue. And I don't say it like a problem. It's not, I
Hmm.
love it. I think it's brilliant. And I think it has such amazing applications to all of our industries. But it is an issue because we don't know. We have no idea how that's going to be treated. Um, Now, as far as copying, um, the law right now for copyright, as soon as you and I create anything, if I write a blog post and put it on my website, put it out into the wild, I own the copyright to that. If an AI bot picks that up and gives that info along with whatever other info to someone, and now they publish it in their blog, the the legal copyright test is whether or not an ordinary observer, so I did that, another lawyer did that, and Sharon's reading both of our blogs, whether or not an ordinary observer would say, hey, I think the same person wrote those two things. Um, so if you would read both of them and think that the same person wrote them, I would have a good copyright claim. It doesn't have to, you don't have to have intent to copy. If you've copied, you've copied. I don't know how that's going to shake out. I think copyright, I think the rights to copy, that copyrights are
Hmm.
going to get watered down. I don't see any other way around it other than copyrights are going to get watered down and more knowledge is going to be considered general knowledge. Um, I don't see any other way for it to go. That's me looking in a crystal ball, and that's me being pro AI. Our lawmakers and our judges are not our generation. They are very resistant to AI. Our regulatory bodies, when you're looking at the state bar that regulates lawyers, the nursing boards that regulate nursings, any of our, the real estate commission that regulates realtors, any of our licensing bodies, the people sitting on those boards are retired. They are very resistant to AI. And I think we're going to see like a start and stop where I think we're going to see a bunch of decisions that are very anti-AI. And then I think they're going to backpedal out of it and go, wait, okay, I guess this is useful. We're not going to try to ban it so much. Um, Recently, there was a man that showed up in court with an AI lawyer that he wrote the code for. He created this AI lawyer and just shows up in court, pulls up a screen, and has this
Wow.
robot representing
Yeah.
him. And the judge lost her mind on him. And he was in trouble. That was not a good look. I don't
Wow.
see that happening anytime soon where we're going to replace lawyers and doctors with AI. I think it's a tool. I think it's a valuable tool. I think in the recruiting world, it can make you so much more productive and do so much more for your clients in a short period of time. But I would not worry about getting replaced. I do not think it's going to replace people within our career path. And don't try to get it to. I think it's still new enough. It still makes enough mistakes. You need to put your human mind behind it too. Because I think you look at other legal issues with not fulfilling your role in your contracts and your obligations to your clients if you just think you can kick back and put the whole brain on a computer that we're not even really sure how it works yet. The general
Yeah.
public isn't.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be so interesting. I know for our industry, I mean, we're able to use it in so many different ways, but yeah, it's a tool, at least right now. It's a tool that we can use to be more efficient, find out more research, source candidates. But yeah, hopefully I don't see it replacing us in the near
No.
future.
And I
So
think as the recruiters, you can really have an intelligent conversation with your clients as far as the companies that you're placing for. Because as we all know, and as every one of your clients, we've all had a bad hire. And on paper, they're excellent. And then they get in there and you're like, what went wrong? What
yeah.
happened here? And there's so much humanness that happens behind catching that bad hire that maybe all of us could go back to that interview and go, hmm, maybe I should have listened to myself a little bit more when their inflection was strange on this certain question and all of that. And I think that's where, as recruiters, um, you can really encourage the companies that use you for placement to that they still need you, that AI won't replace you because of course they can filter through resumes and experience in seconds. It's not going to pick up the weird hire that everybody's like it, it's vibes. It's not going to
Right.
get the vibes or the
Yeah.
lack of vibes.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think with AI too, there's so much for recruiters, like for marketing and branding and content on social media, that we're able to leverage AI. And so, yeah, that's why I was curious on the whole like copywriting. That's really interesting what you said. Like if someone's writing a blog post, and then someone else copies that, that's copyright. What do you call that? Like
Yeah,
copyright
infringement. Yeah.
infringement? Yeah. Um, I wonder, do you think that would be for LinkedIn posts as well? Like not even a blog, but just like, you
Yeah,
know,
so
LinkedIn
anything
posts.
copyright calls anything in tangible form. So tangible form is going to be a post,
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn, a blog, anything that you've actually written out or spoken.
Mm-hmm.
Spoken. It's yeah. We'll just say yeah.
Yeah.
um, so my encouragement, like the way to make it very simple, is use AI as a tool and then make it your own. Put it in your own voice. Um, use your own words. I, I use it for all of those tools as well. And I have to be really intentional because there aren't a lot of lawyers that show up on social media the way I do. So there's fewer places for AI to source and there's a higher risk that it's copying someone else. So use it as an inspirational tool, but take a minute to make it your own. And for the most part, somebody's not going to sue you over a LinkedIn post. That would be a very expensive, weird move for them. But I would say take demand seriously. If somebody were to say, "Hey, it looks like you're copying my stuff," um, you know, there's there's very few original ideas left. We all are going to think of the same things. So for the most part, if you've made it your own and you go look at their stuff and you're not like, "Whoa, this is strikingly the same," um, then you're fine. Just keep doing you and don't worry about people. But if you are using it as a tool and then you get called out and you look and you're like, oh crap, that is almost identical, adjust the way you're doing things for sure.
Make it your own.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was, yeah. Thank you. So where, I know you were talking about social media, where can people find you if they want to follow you, if they have more questions? And I'll put all of that in the interview notes.
Yeah, my hub is Instagram. So if you go to Instagram at the lawyer Sarah, that has my bio link has all of the ways to get in touch with me, how to schedule a consult. I also have a contract template shop that you can access through that. So Instagram at the lawyer Sarah is the best central location for me.
Perfect. I'll put that in there. Thank you so much, Sarah. This was so good. There's so
Yeah, thanks for
much
letting
to
me
take
nerd out
in.
on all of this stuff.
Love it. And yeah, we'll have to have you back again. So thank you so much. And for all of our listeners, thank you for being here, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining me today. I would love to hear what resonated with you or suggestions for a future show. Connect with me on LinkedIn and be sure to sign up for our monthly newsletter. All the links are in the show notes. And if you or someone you know is an amazing recruiter and is looking to join my brokerage recruiting model for more time, freedom, and money, let's chat.